There's only one of all of us. And that uniqueness that we have gives us a single capacity to do something nobody else in this creation can do. And when we step into that and we develop that skill, we live a life of alignment. There's a certain level of tranquility of being. There's a purpose and a reason to get up. So there is no insignificance in life whatsoever. And in my opinion, it's up to us not to put a judgment on what we believe the value of our contribution is, because we as humans traditionally discount ourselves significantly to our detriment. And again, I just want to say that everybody is the best at something that nobody else is. And that contribution impacts all of humanity.
Hey y'all, it's Livy Redden. Welcome back to Today is the Future. I want to open today's episode with a quote, and that is, "I do not chase goals, I answer callings." And this is a quote from Dr. Jeff Spencer, who is today's guest on the podcast. This episode has so many universal truths that will hit home for a very wide range of people. And in addition to that, if you are someone that is working towards a big goal or, are in the pursuit of creating something that feels much bigger than yourself, this is the exact episode that you need to listen to. We talk about how to know you've chosen the right goal, and Dr. Spencer talks a lot about how people don't take a moment to be really intentional about first choosing the goals they're pursuing. Is this a pursuit of ego, or do I feel called to do this thing? Is it the time to pursue this thing? Am I ready to start pursuing it, or do I need to prep more before heading down this path? And he goes into this in a really detailed and human way. And then on the other side of that coin is why people lack clarity or motivation in the pursuit of a goal, and what you need to know about life and human biology really to push past that. Now, that being said, I want to give you a quick introduction to Dr. Jeff Spencer. He is a man who has spent 5 decades building champions. At the age of 11, he wrote a contract with himself to make the 1972 Olympic Games, a goal he accomplished in his early 20s, competing in 2 cycling events and learning the keys to goal achievement. Since then, his 500,000 hours in the high-performance world allows him to see things from every perspective. Dr. Spencer has helped athletes win over 40 gold medals and cycling teams to 8 Tour de France victories. And I want to say, in addition, I have watched him speak and coach firsthand, and it is really unlike anything I've ever witnessed. He has also authored 3 books, been awarded International Sports Chiropractor of the Year, is the creator of the Champions Blueprint methodology, and had his glass-blowing art displayed in some of the world's finest galleries. Today, Dr. Spencer is most renowned as mentor to thought leaders and businesses who want to exponentially grow and really sort of reach an iconic status. And some of his notable clients that many of you will know: Tiger Woods, Richard Branson, the band U2, Lance Armstrong, Alberto Contador, Maria Sharapova, which I think is so cool. I love her. Nike, Hitachi, and Dave Asprey's Bulletproof. However, his proudest achievement is the raising of his adopted daughter, Kin, with his wife, Christina. Kin is also someone to be sure to watch out for. She's a fellow 20-something that I've been able to get to know a bit myself, and she really is a woman of pure resilience and power and kindness, and she's beginning to start to share her incredible story with the world, so definitely keep her on your radar as well. And last but not least, all the links and socials will be in the show notes if you'd like to connect with me or Dr. Jeff after the episode. So I wanted to start just to lay a foundation. I mean, I know a decent amount about your story, but there is a lot of talk about how, especially your first 8 years of life are very crucial for development. But I'm curious if there's anything, what comes to mind when I ask what happened in your life, would you say, before the age of 10 that may have impacted who you are now or were a part of setting you on a certain course?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, with parents, I wasn't sure what parents did because I don't really remember eating meals together. I don't really remember getting much advice, but they were not meddling and telling me what to do and pointing out all my faults or trying to encourage me to do something that I didn't want to do. So it was a very different in that respect. I just kind of felt like, well, I guess it's up to me to figure this out. And it wasn't a problem for me. If that's the rules, then that's okay. And I have a self-starting gene, so I never needed to be motivated by anybody to do anything. So that those two assets, I think, really helped a lot. And then when I was 7, I wanted to become an Olympian. I thought that'd be cool because I saw it on television, and I was a very physical kid. I like to throw things and jump over things and do things to explore the universe. And I've been an explorer in a certain sense where my motivation is to see what's possible. I'm not reckless. I'm very responsible in what I do. I'm not a daredevil. I'm not tempted by people to show people that I can do it when they tell me that I can't. I think that that's a pretty lame motivation, quite honestly. And so with that self-starting side to myself, and I showed a certain level of precociousness in certain areas as well. So there were people that were willing to embrace and bring me into their world and share with me things that I didn't know about myself, or to expose me to certain things that were latent potentials that I didn't even know about. So it was a very interesting time. And at that point too, it was safe. You go out and spend out all night walking around, do whatever you want. In a certain sense, the guardrails in culture and society allowed us to be able to do that. So it was a great time of vast exploration. There was no really crime to speak of. There was no, some of the dangers that we have today, it was non-existent. So it was really almost like a free playground to be explored. And with my personality, I think that that was a really good fit.
Remind me again where you grew up.
Yeah, in Southern California, LA.
I want to point out one thing that you said just for anybody listening. I think it's very important the way you framed that when I asked that question, where you express the pros and cons of growing up in the way that you did, because I think it can be very easy if there was certain difficulties in the way we grew up to kind of focus very heavily on the negatives. And I have, as I've gotten older, I found it empowering to remember, even if things were difficult in certain ways in the way you grew up, there's also pros to a lot of the, some of that in the way that you express. So I just wanted to point that out because I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And quite honestly, with that, many of the things that we'd like to have aren't really good for us. Quite honestly, as we're growing up, and as I told my daughter, like, the more that you object to me and what I'm doing, I know that I'm on the right track, because there's a natural tendency to not want to create order, to do things your own way because you want to do it, and things like that. So I do feel like that level of unrestrained randomness, if it becomes habitual, there's no way a person can direct their energies forward over the long term and create their greatest body of work. And conversely, if life, we think that we want an easy life and we want everything that we like to have gifted to us, but those people, they don't have appreciation. They don't know how to work for things. They don't know how to be gracious about things. They don't have confidence in themselves. They've been actually neutered because they've been given too many things that have prevented them from developing their own skill to be an independent manifester of what their potentials and what their talents are.
A question on that, as you sort of bring up, I want to talk to you more about parenting a little bit later, but I will ask this question now. How do you strike that balance with as a parent or even as a coach, really, between setting someone up for independence, but still letting them know that there's support there, but not in a way that's like they're relying on you too much, I suppose? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, the skill of that is to know what a person's reach is. We all, at any point in time, we have a capacity for doing something, and we need to know what that reach is, because if you engage in a task that's far beyond the reach, then you could actually create a sense of lack of confidence in someone because it's too big. And if they can't get there, then they think something's wrong with them, but it was actually too big of a goal to pursue. And if it's too easy, then they kind of feel like I just know everything and everything comes so easily to me, that they don't develop the skills, the natural inquiry to raise their bar of capacity. So the way that I do it, and I don't care who it is, it could be a movie star, it could be a sports idol, it doesn't matter. It's always, what is their reach and what are the targets that we should be setting based upon their mentality and where they are in their development. And as long as we have that appropriately chosen, then a person has enough aspiration to try to move beyond where they are. But the challenge of that is not insurmountable, like in their own mind. That's the way that I've always done it.
Yeah.
And everybody on the planet, regardless of how accomplished they are, that's a standard that I found to be very, very useful.
Yeah, I really like that perspective. And I remember you mentioning something along those lines in another podcast that you were speaking on. And I had genuinely never heard anyone phrase it in that way because I think there's a lot of sort of like reach for the stars type of content out there when it's
Mhm.
like also there's a level of human nature at play where you also need certain stepping stones. Like it's not so much here to here immediately. So I find that, yeah, that's very interesting.
Well, I would say also that if the reach is too big, then you run a very high risk of not being confident in self. And
Right.
then you kind of adopt that label within yourself. Well, gosh, everybody else is going for the moon. Well, how come I can't do that? I mean, quite
Mm,
honestly, the place to start is to learn the process of goal achievement because it is a process. It's a learned skill. It's not just trying harder or wanting it bad enough. It's really about learning the skill of doing that. And I think way too much, way too soon is really a bad idea because it sets one up to develop bad habits. It will talk people out of becoming what they could be because they're deciding that there's something that maybe is not true, but they're believing it because they can't do it, but the reach was way too big. I'm just not a big fan of that. I think you
yeah.
develop your skill, you learn how to achieve, you learn what it takes, you develop your skill, you make sure that you're continuously building your capacity. And then over time, as you start to gain more and more momentum, you have the least amount of scar tissue from making bad choices that were 100% preventable just because we were trying too hard. So and quite honestly, there's also people that they're not big dreamers. That's not the way that they're hardwired. They're the nano people. And the nano people that make the small things, well, that creates the platform that the big thinkers can leapfrog off of for the bigger aspirations. But neither one of those supersede the other in terms of their importance and the quality of life that we live. So the scorecard here is not so much what does everybody think about what I do or how many people did I influence? It's like, no, did I show up and develop my skills that are unique to me? And did I create a live platform on that? And we know that because when we have that alignment, we have a tranquility of being where we just kind of feel like we're in the right place at the right time. But yet that's not the way the world's set up. It's all done by comparison. We're reading books saying, yeah, you can have everything you want. Well, that's not really true, quite honestly. And it does set us up to believe something that more often than not makes us feel less than. It makes us feel worse than it does help us feel confident and certain in a bigger future.
Yeah. That makes me think of what you said at the end there, where not necessarily everyone is like wired to be anything or achieve anything. And that makes me think of what I hear you speak about a lot of that you don't chase dreams, that you answer callings.
That's true.
Uh,
True.
and my question with that is how would you describe what does it feel like? I mean, and you've also mentioned that you've answered different callings at different times of your life. You don't just have one. And my curiosity is how do you know when a calling is entering in your life? What does it feel like in your mind and your body?
Well, first, I want to address something you said just earlier here that I just want to be clear that everybody is unique in this creation. There's only one of all of us. And that uniqueness that we have gives us a single capacity to do something nobody else in this creation can do. And when we step into that and we develop that skill, we live a life of alignment. There's a certain level of tranquility of being. There's a purpose and a reason to get up. So there is no insignificance in life whatsoever. And in my opinion, it's up to us not to put a judgment on what we believe the value of our contribution is, because we as humans traditionally discount ourselves significantly to our detriment. And again, I just want to say that everybody is the best at something that nobody else is. And that contribution impacts all of humanity because what we do doesn't just stay with us, but it is felt and experienced by people in our proximity. If it's within them, that energy that we project will awaken a potential within them that then can awaken potential in other people and bring an awareness. And all of a sudden, that one thing that was done in the privacy of our own life that we don't think was significant is now impacted a billion people and we don't even know it. That's why I think that it's really important that we don't place a comparative judgment on ourselves about what other people are doing. So to kind of segue into the idea of, yes, I answer callings, not dreams. And yes, because I find that dreams are way too limiting. They don't allow us to be as expansive as we could be. And so let me explain. I was a very accomplished artist at one time. And when I would begin the process of creating a work, I would obviously have in my idea what it is that I want to create. In the process of creation, though, ideas would occur to me to change what I'm doing. I could stick rigidly to the idea, yeah, and then I would have nothing better than the original idea. I would have been a technician creating the piece, not really an artist. I would be a technician just duplicating what I already had in my head. So that's not really creative. That's producing something that was considered to be unique. But if we follow the direction that's being offered to us in our consciousness while we're pursuing something, then it could take us in directions that we previously could not have conceived of. But I found that when I followed that, I was always able to create something vastly better than what I could have conceived of. And I was not really, I didn't generate my own ideas. They showed up in my head and I observed them and I embraced them. And I had enough confidence in them to take action to manifest that thing. And so that's really what being not chasing dreams, but answering callings means. It means that we're in a place of mind, body, soul openness. We're not closed. We're not rigid. We haven't decided we're going to do one thing with blinders. We're not going to listen to anybody else that has any ideas or thoughts. We're going to just mow things down until we get to where we want to get to. We're going to keep our nose to the grindstone. We're going to eat, sleep, and drink the aspiration. I'm going to focus everything on this. And to me, the chance of that manifesting is almost like non-existent. Or if it is, it comes at a great price of time, energy, and so forth. So I found that when you stay receptive and open, emotionally, physically, like I'm open right now. I'm listening to our conversation. I'm hearing what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm responding to what I'm hearing. It's like I haven't made my mind up on what I'm going to say because I don't know yet. So therefore, when I am called into action, meaning that there's a gravity between me. I mean, everybody has had that experience where something shows up. It could be a person, place, or thing. And all of a sudden you experience an increase in energy and an increase in interest. Well, where did that come from? Well, that came from something that called to something within us to consider it. And so, like, for example, when we adopted our daughter at the age of 10, we didn't come up with the idea of adopting a child. The idea occurred to us and we looked at it and we pursued the process to do it that led to our adopting her at 10 from Colombia. It's the best experience I've ever had in my entire life. Here we are 15 years downstream from that. But I answered the calling. It's the same thing with the Olympics. I didn't get up deciding I was going to be an Olympian. The idea popped into my head and there was a gravity, kind of pulled me towards it. And I couldn't get it out of my head because it kind of stayed there. And so I answered the calling, meaning I pursued it, see where it went. And I had the ability to become an Olympian, which I did become 10 years later. I devoted 10 years of my life to doing it. And so that's what I mean by a calling. A calling is not sitting there waiting for something to happen or waiting for an emotional pull or tug to bring us something. It usually doesn't show up like that. It's more of a gravity and a connection and a quiet, silent knowing of a possibility. That's what it feels like. If it's too emotional, then it's usually in self-interest and it usually doesn't turn out well. It's an ambition we get all excited about, but then it's like having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Oh my God, I just met this person. They're the perfect person for me. And then, you're telling everybody this. And then 2 weeks later, you're saying, man, what was I thinking? That was the worst thing ever. What was I thinking? Well, that's a good question. What were you thinking?
Yeah.
I think that's the way we look at this, in my opinion. And this goes against human nature because, human nature wants a certainty. If I do this, I get that. But, that's not the way it works because what we want, what it takes to get it, that's a moving target that's always changing. So, therefore, if we're adjusting as we go, then we can seize better opportunities that present themselves in the process of pursuing the original goal. And so it kind of tweaks and it moves by being adaptable and receptive to new ways of improving what we originally thought to be true. I hope
Yeah.
that kind of explains it with a little bit more
Yeah,
experiential side to it.
it does. Yeah. And also when you describe that, it just I think this can also feel like a very, because I'm sure some people are listening and they're like, oh, I don't feel like I know exactly how to know when I experience that, what you've described of what I was hearing was you said an increase in awareness and energy, but it's a settled feeling. It's a knowing and it's
Curiosity.
calm.
Curiosity.
And I think that's the what you're describing can feel quite serious, but it's also so fun. Like it's so fun that we get to be in that state of openness and not know what could occur next if we stay in that.
Most human nature, that doesn't align with human nature. Human nature wants certainty because our human nature is all about fear. Our human nature is about fear of loss and doing the wrong thing. And quite honestly, most people have more confidence in their ability to fail than they do in their ability to succeed.
Yeah.
So there has to be, in my terminology, you do have to be like supernatural. You need to go beyond your fear-based survival impulses, where everything is made based on safety and
Right.
things like that. Safety is 100% important, of course, but not at the expense of answering a calling that's different. And we're not talking about being reckless, where a person just decides, I'll follow my intellect, bad idea. I'll follow my emotions, bad idea too, because all of those are subject to bias and they're not always and can't be deemed highly reliable. And I
Mm.
think we all kind of know that from our experience. So just a couple of things to be mindful of here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like that you pointed that out too, that it's that the fear-based survival piece is going to be sort of the core of that human nature. However, you can tap into that more supernatural self and kind of, well, would you say, actually, I do have a question on that. Would you say that you are more transcending that fear or feeling the fear and doing it anyway?
That deserves a couple of points here on this is that the first thing I want to say is that the fear response is hardwired biology that's hardwired into our DNA. We did not ask for it. We did not choose it. It's there.
Right.
It's part of what the human species is. And it always gets first dibs at every moment because our highest priority biologically is to survive physically and psychologically. So we will do anything to survive. But living a life of survival doesn't mean that you're going to live a life of highest contribution and value. It just means that you're going to survive. Surviving isn't, in my opinion, good enough because we have another side to our biology that is equally strong, and that's our seeking curiosity side that's also hardwired into us. So I want to be explicitly clear here, and it's a little bit hard sometimes for people to get the concept of how is intuition different from feeling. It gets kind of messy when you get into the details of that because it's sometimes hard to articulate that in a way that people understand it. But the most important thing is, yeah, you probably, I think everybody on this call will have to admit to one thing is that there probably was a point in time where you were startled by something or you felt like you were aggressively imposed upon, where you said something back to somebody faster than you could think. And you thought it was awesome what you said, but how often does that turn out to be the right thing to do?
Yeah.
Well, how about like never? It's like, well, who was that person? It wasn't me. Well, it was your
Yeah.
mouth. How could it not be you? Well, yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the survival you that did that. It's not the champion you that did that. So there are two parts to it. So you got a champion side and you got the survivor side. And that's the biology, that's the war that we fight day in and day out, quite honestly. And so to me, we need to be mindful of that because many people can be very harsh on themselves by repeating certain things that are biologically hardwired that we didn't ask for. We are responsible for how we respond to things, but the initial response, sometimes we can't help because it's faster than we can think. I just want to make sure everybody is really clear on that. So you're responsible for all your actions, correct? Some of your impulses are faster than you can think, especially as survival is concerned. So when that happens, you just need to understand that it's a biology doing it, and it doesn't mean that we need to take action on it. The idea of feeling the fear and doing it anyway, that needs to be clarified. Let me explain. A lot of people think that the problem is the fear that I feel. And so therefore, the way I overcome the fear is to do the thing I wanted to do that I'm afraid of doing because the fear makes me not do it. Well, let's try this on for size. What if that's fear and fear is not your foe, but it's your friend? It's telling you, you're not ready for this. Don't do it. Stop. And so I'm a big fan. I think it's incredibly reckless and immature to believe that the solution to fear is to do the thing that is making you afraid. I say, stop, look around, something's missing. What is it that you need to do to make sure that you're ready to embark on this? That would be my suggestion on it.
I like that. It's really
Let me say
interesting.
something else here is that, like, when you look at the self-preservation biology here, the self-preservation biology is that I'm afraid, so won't even try. I mean, everyone's done this. You've already decided that you're going to fail in advance. I see this all the time. My daughter, Dad, we're going to lose a soccer game tonight. Well, how do you know that? Well, I saw a picture of the other team. They're just big. Therefore, we're going to lose. We can't win. I was like, well, wait a minute. Can't you just put that aside and play the game and see what happens? I just know they're bigger. We might as well not even go. How often does that happen? I'm going to test. I know I'm going to fail. Well, how do you come up with that? So really, we do have this greater belief in our ability to fail than our ability to succeed. And the way that we overcome that is that we realize, well, there's a mythology to that, but really the champions say it differently. They say, I trust my preparation, so go all in. Now that's different than feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That to me is incredibly reckless. To trust my preparation, which means I know I'm ready because I know I prepared, then I can go all in. Yeah, exactly. So you may have some performance anxiety, but the performance anxiety is different than your fear saying, stop, you're not ready. You can see how this gets very confusing. And
Yeah.
we have our human nature that's trying to tell us a story. Yeah, you got to show your fear who's boss, because if you don't step into this, then you're too scared to do it. Therefore, you're forfeiting to your fear. You've lost the game. So what do you say? You grow up and you take on the fear. And I'm saying, if you hear yourself do that, just stop. Just stop. Take a look around. See what's missing. And if you are prepared, you have a body of evidence that you can execute what you're supposed to do, well, then that's performance anxiety. That's not your friend saying, don't do it. Can you see the difference there?
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that distinction. I think that is very helpful. The difference between fear and performance anxiety. Kind of switching gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you, I sent out, I have a text community with a bunch of people in their 20s, and I told them that you were coming on, and I said, what are your questions? What would be your questions for him? And a lot of the questions I received had to do with consistency and motivation. And I'm curious what your perspective is on the core reason people struggle to be consistent as they're pursuing something, and what would need to be tweaked.
A lot of reasons. To me, if you have there's all sorts of different types of goals. There's big,
That's
hairy,
true.
audacious goals. There's moonshots. There's smart goals, correct?
Yeah.
I think the only goal that we really want is the right goal. because when we have the right goal, because it's been thoughtfully considered, most people, they don't really consider the goals that they pursue. They don't ask, why is this relevant to me? Why should I be doing this? They don't really ask, what level of impact will this goal have once it's achieved? They don't ask, is there enough grit? Is there enough personal growth in this for me? Is there enough humanity in what I do to be of value to others? Is it the right time to do it? Do I have the time to do it? Is the time to do it? Do I have enough of that? They never think about stuff like that. It's all generally an emotive feeling about what we're going to get back. Oh, I'm going to get a new car for this, or something, right? And so that doesn't mean it's the right goal. I just really feel that we need to have a deeper, and this is an aspirational goal. We're not talking about taking the trash out. We're talking about an aspirational goal like that. So if we have the right goal and we know it, then you need a plan to get there. And the plan that you have should have the right size steps and distance between the steps where you can look at it and you can believe that you can do it. You can't just make it up. If you don't have the right goal and you're making it up, that means that you don't know what to do. Your body and your brain knows it. So it's going to make you feel uncertain and cautious about even starting
Right.
because there's not enough there to start. So, therefore, I think there's some preliminary things that have to happen here that allow us to believe in the goal itself, to have a relationship with it. I think it's really important to talk to somebody that's done it so that you can get some sense of what the process is to get there. Because otherwise, it's like flying an airplane blindfolded. You don't know where, going into the jungle without a compass. There's danger out there. So I think most people think, well, I have enough emotion. I just want to do this. I'll just get started and I'll let the universe fill in the gaps. Like nobody that plays a big game ever does that. They don't do that. They take their time. They ask, am I ready to do this? What am I ready to do here? Is this the right goal for me? But somehow I think that there's this idea that, everything I need to know is just going to magically show up. And if I want it bad enough, it's going to happen. And if I stay in belief, believe, then all of a sudden everything backfills and I get a free pass to nirvana. It doesn't work like that, quite honestly. I know that's very appealing to the human mindset, human nature, because human nature wants a shortcut because it's lazy and it's kind of like sloppy,
Yeah.
and it wants everything for nothing, quite honestly. So that's not the way to develop a healthy relationship to what your goals really are.
Right.
To me, there's three things you got to know. Number one, like, what is your state of readiness? How ready are you for what? Because if you're not ready for it, well, then don't do it. Well, I know, but it's somehow the universe will fill in all the gaps and give me what I need when I need it. Don't count on that because the people that are prolific goal achievers, they don't believe that. You have to be ready and know what you're capable of. Then you choose the goal that's the appropriate distance from what your state of readiness is. And so that's really ultimately like how it's done. When I hear I'm not motivated enough or whatever, to me, it's just like the plan has not been put together in a way that the person can bond with it in belief and knowing that they can actually do it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm gonna move us forward in the conversation a little bit because I want to save time for these other questions I have, but I did want to mention I'm gonna put another podcast that Jeff appeared on with our friend James Whitaker in the show notes for anybody listening. And in there he talks a lot more in depth about what you're mentioning here. You went into depth in that episode with about those steps, how to set up those steps, goal clarity. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put that episode in the show notes. So for anyone listening, definitely go listen to that episode as well. But to get into more of the meat and potatoes. When I had sent you the link to figure out a day for us to do this, I have a question in there asking about what core thing you wanted to speak about to people around the ages of like 18 to 26. And you had said why at this age range we're at the greatest risk of doing something that complicates our life potentially forever. I'm curious, why was that your answer?
Because I have a daughter um, who's now 25.
Yeah.
I know people because I'm a student of humanity. I know how people think. And my position is that the biggest risk to anybody is making choices on what they think it is when it's not, because the universe and the world doesn't care what you think. If it's not what it is, it's still not what it is. Whatever the consequences of the choice are, that's what it's going to be. And the younger we are, oftentimes the less knowledge we have about the choices that we're pursuing, and things that seem like a good idea may not end up like that. And my observation is that between the ages of like 18 and 25 is when people are the most vulnerable to doing things that can be high risk, that can create a very high level of complexity that could affect their life perhaps permanently or for a couple of decades, like moving forward. Particularly, generally during that age, people like my daughter, when she was 17, declared to me, Dad, I know everything I need to know. I don't need your help anymore. I got this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you kind of don't, quite honestly, but she thought she did. And, one of the things that I always told my daughter, she knows I'm not going to give her a lecture and I'm not going to chew her out and I'm not going to talk like an old man. But I said to her, Ken's her name, K-I-N. I said, look, I want to talk to you about a couple things here. I don't expect you to understand, and I'm not telling you what to do. I just want to share with you what's coming so that when it shows up, you're going to remember this conversation and you're going to come back to me and we're going to pick up the conversation. So she always knew that there was another side to what I said, and that it's a really important thing to listen, because a lot of the things that we believe to be true between 18 and 25 aren't really what it seems to be, but we don't have the experience to know that yet. And that's why avoiding certain things, if possible, but also knowing that at different points in our life, we have a certain level of receptivity to listen to things or to believe things. And so to me, there's a very high risk there of doing things that could significantly compromise a life. There could
Mm.
be things that are done that are dangerous, daredevil stuff. There can be substance abuse. There can be things that lead to now being responsible for other people's lives for the next 25 years that can happen. And most people, in my experience, they don't listen because they just think whatever they think that that means that's what it is. And at that age, it's generally not. And the cost of, again, these breaches and oversights can be very difficult in terms of the impact that we have. But again, most people don't listen and they just have to learn like the hard way. And I get that. And if that's what it is, well, then that's what it ends up being. But I feel like we need to at least be mindful of certain things. And I think that it is important to have sound counsel about certain things. But again, that age that's has a lot of altruism attached to it, et cetera, it's really difficult.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you on this. I mean, this is sort of what you're describing is sort of my whole thing. I mean, the sooner you know, the better. The sooner you listen, the better is really what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, I just care about people, and like every generation's the same. Every generation thinks it's the new generation, but it's not. It's just the same thing that's happened for, the last 5,000 years or whatever. So again, but we can't believe it. Like you give somebody a motorcycle, they only know how fast they can go when they're in the hospital with a broken leg, saying, well, if I just went 3 miles an hour less, I wouldn't be here in the hospital. So, again, it's a bit of a delicate conversation because nobody wants to be talked at and nobody wants to give a lecture. It's really about a way of looking at things with the probability. And there's always warning signs that happen before any of these things that could be catastrophic happen. There's always some warning sign that people just usually don't listen to because, oh, it was so small, I just didn't think it was worth listening to. So they do it anyhow, and that just kills me because I know the challenges that to make up for the lost ground it could possibly be. So, to me, the idea is let's limit this as much as we can. It doesn't mean that we live in a straitjacket at all. People think, well, oh my gosh, well, I don't have any life experiences because I'm going to be in a straitjacket. No, you're really not. That's why this is a difficult thing to negotiate.
Yeah. This makes me think about something my mom would always tell me growing up. She was like the mom to a lot of our friends too, and she would
Oh, good.
sit us all down for talks like this, and
Oh, wonderful.
she would use this analogy of, and I think I write about this in my book, I do, of the funnel, where she was like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. However, if you think of life like a funnel, if you are more mindful and, maybe restrain from certain things, doing certain things, thinking that you know exactly what you're doing, life opens up in this way as you get older. You leave yourself for
That's
more
true.
possibility
True.
and not having made decisions that can potentially affect you forever or for a very long time. And I remember at the time I was like, okay, thank you, Mom. That's okay. But I've thought about that a lot ever since she started telling us that when we were teenagers, where it's, those sort of having a little bit more foresight, though that's not a straitjacket, or, if you sort of the analogy of like if you go bungee jumping off of a bridge, those are the safety cords to make the experience enjoyable and so that you get out alive. And yeah, I find that analogy a bit similar to what you're describing.
Well, again, it's a battle because people just don't believe that it's possible as if they have some exemption from the possibility. And so most people, they just ignore it because they don't believe that it's true, or they just believe that it's not going to happen to them. So it's delicate.
Mm,
I just feel like, as I said before 10 times already, it's like if you can inform, but it's not giving a lecture, it's just putting something on the radar. I think it's more important to suggest these are the things that always happen preceding the event. It's not once you have the event, then you're screwed. It's not like that. It's like if you see these things happening, then that means this is
mm,
on its way. And if you see this, let's come back and huddle up so that we can avoid the problem that you don't have to have. And I
mm.
found that my daughter, we always communicated well on everything because she did not think that I was giving her a lecture, because I wasn't. I just cared about her. We needed to find a language to continue the conversation at the right time.
Yeah. Which is it's very cool. I don't know, it makes me a little bit emotional too to hear you say that too, because as someone that you described at the beginning of this podcast, where you had said I didn't really know what a parent did or what
Mm.
parenting was like, it's very cool to hear you describe this way of in tune, guided, empowering parenting that you were able to provide your daughter, even when you maybe, I mean, from your biological parents didn't quite get that. And I think I just want to point that out because I think that's so cool.
Well, thank you. I must admit, though, I had three angels in my life that were kind of surrogate parents at the right time for me that brought forth in me some untapped potentials that I was unaware of. And they were always there to provide the counsel that I needed to hear because I was a receptive to that.
Mm.
And I was a good listener, and I was always curious about certain things. So I appreciate you saying that. And I don't think there is a manual for parenting in a
Yeah.
certain sense. And I will say this, being a dad is the thing that I love the most, is to be a dad. I don't know if there's anything better or more challenging, quite honestly, because you're responsible for an individual and their contribution to humanity and their pass through this dimension. To be a good parent, I think it's heroic because of what's required to be a good parent, especially in today's world with all the challenges that we face. But, you know, then again, children don't ask to be born. It's something that we bring into the world that we're responsible for. And regardless of what the circumstances are, it's our job to finish the job in
Yeah.
terms of parenting as fulfilling our obligation to the relationship.
I'm gonna clip that and get that out there to all the parents that I mean, I completely agree. Truly heroes. Like that shapes all of society, good parents. And on the topic of parenting, I have heard you mention that you would love to give a TEDx on your or a TED Talk about your daughter's the experience with your daughter's adoption and to give people you adopted her from Colombia. She was 10 years old, severe abuse. And you speak about how transformative and difficult and also it sounds like beautiful that journey was. I'm curious why that is something that why that for a TED Talk, I suppose. Like what would be the message that you learned or continue to learn from that experience as a that you would want to get out there?
I learned several things from adopting our daughter. She was exposed, she was exposed to the most hideous mistreatment imaginable, and she didn't ask for that. So what I learned from our daughter, and let me preface a couple things here, is that she didn't speak any English when we adopted her. We didn't speak any Spanish. We had no language when we went to Colombia and got her. She had PTSD and ADHD from severe physical and mental abuse. She had no school, parasitic-ridden body, didn't trust anybody, severe malnutrition for 10 years. It was as worse, as bad as it gets. So that aside, my wife cried every day for 9 years and 10 months because it was so difficult. But when you show up for duty, you got to finish the job. I'm an Olympian. I don't play a bronze medal game. You're in it. You got to deliver on the promise of what that is.
Mm.
So what I learned from our daughter is this. Number one, you can love anybody. It's a choice that you make. There doesn't need to be a special set of conditions that you agree to. It's not, I'll do this if I get that. It's like a one-way street. And when you step into life like that, it is the most empowering thing that I have ever experienced in my entire life. Because if you think what you do doesn't matter, adopt a kid because they hang on your every word. Our job was not just to save a life, it was to manifest the potential. And if that's what you're looking for, that requires an extraordinary level of commitment to be able to make that happen. But yet, being an Olympian, I do know what full potential is because my job for 10 years was to define and create my full potential. That was my entire job. I know what that's like. And that's what I want, not just for my daughter, but I want that for everybody. The next thing I learned is that you have to trust the process. Because when you're involved in something that is so demanding and so challenging, sometimes there is no visibility about future. You don't see a path forward, or it's not clear, or the circumstances of getting through a day are so disrupted just to get through the day is like its own miracle. And there are many times where you don't see a path forward and you can't generate one if you can't see it. So there does have to be an inherent trust, like in the process itself. That's a big deal because life really, in the plans that we have, they're estimated projections of the future, quite honestly. But the reality is, as we move forward with the plan, we do meet thin reality and we have to make the adjustments. So you do have to trust the process. You can't rigidly hang on to something that's become obsolete. And every day, every second, it's going to be something different that you're dealing with. And you have to have the constitution and the willingness to step into it. Every one of us can do that. You have to trust the process because that's all you got sometimes. The other thing that I learned from my daughter is that when you answer the call, which we did, we were definitely called to adopt our daughter. And so we went through the couple years process to do it. It was tedious. It took time. It was expensive. All that stuff doesn't matter. And when we answered that calling and we adopted our daughter, what I can tell you is this, is that when you show up with honor and dignity, there's always going to be enough energy to do anything on behalf of other people. Always. There is no exception. where energy is sparse and where we feel a lack of energy or a draining of energy is when we get frustrated because life is not being bent to the way that we want it. I see it like the world should revolve around us. I don't think so. So again, that's a really important thing to be mindful of. There's always enough energy to do anything on behalf of others. The next thing I learned is probably the most important thing that every one of us should think about every day, and that's how you're going to show up. And my daughter, she hung on my every word. She trusted me, but it took 10 years for her to trust us. That's why she made our life so miserable. It's almost like, I'm going to make your life so miserable. And if you still love me and I do everything I can to make you not like me, then I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
I kind of felt like that was her psychology. That was 10 years.
Yeah.
And so,
Which I suppose makes sense based on how her like formative years were.
well, that's correct. And that's the reason why deciding how you're going to show up matters, because had people showed up differently for my daughter, she wouldn't have the trust issues because she did not ask for that.
Yep.
People that impose themselves on her physically and mentally, that was abuse at the highest level. She did not ask for that. And yet, she has to deal with the scars of that, whatever that is. She did not ask for that. And so none of us have the right to show up from anything less than our highest self, because anything that we do to impose anything on anybody else, that's crossing the line, in my opinion. You don't do that. If you're having a bad life, don't blame somebody else. It's up to you to figure that out. But don't put your bad days on somebody else. That is absolutely 100% crossing the line. And to me, we talked about the two different mentalities. We talked about human nature. Human nature is greedy. It wants to whine and snivel. It wants everything for nothing. It bitches about everything. It's miserable. But, the champion is different. The champion shows up and they do what has to get done to fulfill their obligations to other people, but also demonstrate that there's another side to us if we so choose to do that. But, the other side of this, it doesn't come automatically, because that's not what human nature is. This is a supernatural human that decides to show up and give mostly of themselves. It's not natural. Natural is to whine and survive, correct? Steal, cheat, lie, whatever. That's not the way that the other side of it does things. And the final thing that I learned is that you always hold space for the possibility of a miracle. You never discount that as a possibility. You cannot command that into existence. It doesn't work like that. We can petition for it. We can pray for it. We can do all sorts of things, but that's something that is its own process. But you absolutely 100% always have to hold space for that as a possibility. And in my opinion, if those 5 things that I just shared can be done in the foundation of what our life is, and none of those things come naturally to us. I mean, quite honestly, all the good stuff in life doesn't come naturally, and it doesn't self-perpetuate, and it can't be rushed. All the good stuff has got to be applied, and it's maintained through its application. Doesn't mean that we have to do as much to get it as we need to do to keep it. But I'm just kind of saying that if you want an easy life and you want life to unfold for you without doing anything, well, it's never going to happen. All the good stuff has to be applied. Otherwise, it starts to wither and it starts to dry up and it no longer becomes accessible. And like with those 5 things, what I did notice is that there's a certain level of boldness that comes from that. Because when you live life through that, you're kind of not relying on the usual stuff that people rely on for their sense of value, their sense of accomplishment, because it's not outside, it's within oneself. And I can honestly say that there's a certain level of invincibility that comes along with that. Like, you want to cancel me, go ahead. I don't care, because it's like, I'm still going to show up and be me, because I'm going to give everything that I've got that I need to give to know that I've lived my life fully on behalf of other people. If you want to cancel me, well, go ahead, because that's not going to stop me, because I'm not going to play your game. There's an invincibility that comes along with that. And it's not a chip on the shoulder. It's not. There's just a steadfastness to another way of engaging life that has a certain level of commitment to it that just is, and
Mm.
there's a certainty that demands a certain level of us to be present that only we know the standard of, that's up to us to be able to do, to be able to get up every day and know that we've done our job as a human. And
Yeah.
I think in today's world, sometimes that could be challenging. So that's what I learned with my daughter. I love her to pieces. She has a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, like right now herself, just the cutest little kid ever.
Oh,
But I can honestly
fun.
say, Olivia, it's like, I love being a dad. Of all the things I've done, whether it's Olympics, whether it's art, whether it's being a sports scientist, whether it's being a doctor, the thing that I love the most is being a father.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, so well articulated and just beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Just an autobiography, or actually like a documentary, but thank you.
I love it. Documentary. That's what's next. We need a Jeff Spencer documentary,
Oh man,
a Spencer family documentary.
I'm telling you, they should do a movie on my daughter, what she's been through and the experience. She reunited with her parents, biologic parents, about a year ago, but her parents had never been in an airplane. They'd never
Mm.
been in a hotel. They'd never eaten a piece of pizza. I mean, can you
Wow.
imagine that? I mean,
No
never
pizza.
been in an escalator.
I'm kidding.
I mean, you're not serious, are you? Yeah, I am
Yeah.
very serious. That's
Interesting.
so to see the level of depravity that's out there and you see what's possible, knowing that no one wins alone. We do need mentorship. We do need collaboration to be able to shortcut our process of learning what creates a vital life of value and contribution, not just the fluff and the silliness, but this other side where the soul gets nourished. We need like an ongoing conversation about that process because it doesn't come naturally to us. It's something that needs to be understood and it needs to be applied.
Yeah. Yeah. I did have I know we're a little bit over. I had one other question I wanted to ask about your experience with your daughter. Is it okay if I
Sure.
ask
Yeah,
that?
of course. Yeah, absolutely.
I I mean, we've been speaking about, what you had just described about your daughter's experience and what it was like, what you learned from being a parent and things you wanted to infuse into her. I'm curious, when you described your daughter to me, Kin, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ken.
You described her as the face of courage.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, um, what about her courage? What did of courage?
I think we need to define courage first. Courage is the rarest of all human attributes. And this is where you make definitive choices to do things that may seem against the grain and they may be extraordinary in nature. It may require every ounce of faith that you have in yourself and in the system. Courage is not kid stuff. We're talking about the real deal here. And my daughter knew at 5 when she got kidnapped and put into the child custody services, whatever the particular name is in Colombia, that she had to find a way out because the future was bleak. Her future, there were 3 choices. It was either trafficking, her being trafficked, it was in the drug cartel, or it was suicide. You got 3 choices. And she knew that none of those were an option for her. She needed to find a way out. And she's amazing. You're not going to crack her. No matter what sort of pressure she's under, no matter what's demanded of her, she's not going to crack. She's going to be able to push things through. That was what allowed her to be able to step into all of the challenges that she faced that are too numerous to list, especially now in our conversation. But it's a boldness to be able to step into something that may be unconventional, that may be too much for most people. But, again, if you're called to it and you know that you're engaging it for a particular reason, that you don't need to absolutely understand the why behind it, but you're called to it and you trust that process, it's an amazing point of liberation. And personally, I think that we all need to kind of get back to that where we need to find our own voice and our own perspective on things, and we should demonstrate that by where we put our time and our energy. And that's how we honor our talents. We honor our pass through this dimension. This is how we say thank you to our friends, our family, our benefactors, our mentors that gave selflessly of us. But perhaps the most important reason why this is necessary is that it points out the distinction that every one of us has to make our unique contribution. And in doing so, living a life of value and contribution that is indispensable. Otherwise, if we don't have that, it's just doing what everybody else does that really isn't making an impact. Yeah, you may be popular or you may be part of the crowd. I get that. But, you know, being part of the sea of all alike that doesn't pull out our innate uniqueness, knowing that there's only one of us in all of creation, to me, to experience the richness and the fulfillment of life really comes from the things that we have been talking about in this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. And I love that focus on that you are one of all creation, and you know, people need to experience that. People need to experience your uniqueness, and it does matter and it does make a difference.
It does. It really does.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I know we're over time. I normally do rapid fire questions. I can skip those if you'd prefer.
Well, rapid fire, we can do those quickly. So
All right, we'll do them quickly.
perfect.
Yeah, my first question is, what piece of advice do you give others that you sometimes have a tough time taking yourself?
Boy, that's hard. I don't give advice that I don't do myself.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say here on that. I'm stumped, I must admit.
fair enough. No, that's fine. I
I'm
mean,
stumped.
also, you've coached, parented. You're like, I'm not giving advice that I don't take.
That's not the, yeah.
My second question, I'm a fashion person. I like fashion. I like the
Okay, me too.
self-expression. Do
Yeah.
you have a fashion or clothing essential, something you really like in regards to expressing yourself fashion-wise?
Well, I really like colors. You know, I never met a color that I didn't like. I've got a really interesting collection of pants that I like wearing. You know, there's chartreuse is one of the colors, and there's
I
some
love
other
that.
kind of offbeat like teal blue and things like that. I love things like that. I tend to dress, very casually, but I'm very sensitive to colors and kind of trendiness and things like that. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Anything that has a design element to it, I absolutely passionately in love with it.
I love that. Are your glasses purposefully matching your shirt? They're
They're
both
blue.
blue.
Yeah, well, they're blue because of my eyes are like really blue, and I'm very because I'm an artist. I show my art internationally. I was a
Right.
very well known artist. So the art thing, I'm always looking at colors, and I'm always looking at things like this. So I mean, obviously the blue is the eyes. I love the blue rims. These are a bit like matte finish, so I love that kind of little artistic tweak to it. Yeah, I love every aspect of that.
I love that. I love that so much. And I love color in clothes. I'm like, yeah, put some color on. What are these neutrals? I'm like, you got tan and a cream. I'm like, give me something,
No, that would not work on
something.
me.
Come on.
Those would be the worst colors for you and I to put on, man. That would be not be a good thing. Not be a good thing at all.
Oh, it's so funny. I love that. My third question is, and I know this might be a little bit of a more difficult question, also knowing, that there was quite a lot of difficulty in your childhood as well, but I'm curious if something comes to mind if you were to paint a still image of a joyful memory as a young person or as a child, what would it look like?
Well, first of all, I would have a smile on my face my entire childhood, because
Mm.
I had no restrictions on what I could and could not do.
Mm.
And I was not a malicious kid. I wasn't a troublemaker, So again, my childhood memories are nothing but beauty because
Oh,
my
good.
parents never abused me. They never said an unkind word to me. They never raised a hand at all.
Mm.
It was as good as it gets. I mean, quite honestly. So I appreciate that. What was the
Cool.
question again?
If there's a joyful moment from your childhood, is there a joyful childhood memory that comes to mind? And what would it look like if you painted it in a still image?
A joyful moment.
Like what would it
Well,
look like as a painting?
yeah, well, it would be me holding a paintbrush and some watercolor paints painting because my father was a very well-known illustrator, and I do remember having access to some of his watercolors. And being a creative myself, I always thought that that was one of the best things ever. So it would be a picture of me as a kid with the watercolor, you know, the little templates that they have with the colors and stuff with a paintbrush. I don't know if that's the imagery that you're looking for, but
No, I love
that's
it.
that's that's
Perfect.
what the paint would be. And probably in the backgrounds there would be some mountains where we live, the San Gabriel Mountains. Yeah, I love beautiful clouds. You know, they would be there as well. The colors would be vibrant. I have a tendency towards all different types of color arrangements, contrasting colors and things like that. That's what it would be like. It wouldn't be photorealism. It would be more stylistic representation
Mm.
and probably in wider swatches rather than hyper details. That's what it
Mm.
would look like.
I like it. Beautiful answer. I loved that. Amazing. My fourth question is, what is a song that you've had on repeat lately or you've really enjoyed lately?
That's interesting that you say that. I was just thinking of my age. Can I say anything that anybody remembers? You know,
They can go
uh,
listen.
well, you know, there's a couple. Listen to the music by the Doobie Brothers. There's "Call Me the Breeze" by Leonard Skinner. Those are a couple that I listened to recently here. And I'm not really a lyricist. I'm really more into the music side of it, you know.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's sort of interesting about me is that I usually prefer quiet to anything.
Yeah.
It's what I prefer. It's just a little bit better, you know, for me, for whatever reason. So I don't really have artists that I follow more than the songs that I have an attraction to the music, not the lyrics as attached to. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. That really resonates with me, honestly, because I feel like there's so many the conversation is often like I don't know, especially people around my age is like I don't know, music never played a big part for me in the way I felt like a lot of people around me it did because kind of like you mentioned, I often do prefer silence.
Yeah.
I don't know, I like just like stillness and if I am listening to music it's usually like lyricless jazz.
Okay. Yeah. These guys just making it up as they go, you know, it's
I
okay
like
too. Mhm.
Yeah, that's so funny. And then my last question is, what is a book you love? Whether it was one that you read a long time ago that was very formative or one you've read recently that you really enjoyed.
I'll give, can I do a couple that
Yeah.
sort of work together? Yeah, the one that I've read recently that I'm actually going through for the third time, and I'm really taking my time through it. It's called Reality by Greg Koukl, 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 Greg Koukl. It's answered a lot of questions that I've had for a long time that I heard answers to the questions before, but I never really had a resonance with what I was being told. It just seemed like something was off. And because I wasn't an expert in the topic, I didn't know what that was. But in reading this book, he provided answers to these questions that were very important for me to understand. And kind of all of it was there in one place that was very helpful to me. Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. I'll look into that.
Reality, Gray Kokel. Yeah.
Reality.
Groundbreaking
Oh,
book for me, one of the most probably impactful experiences of my entire life, quite
wow.
honestly. Yeah. I mean,
Was it
seriously.
published recently?
I don't think
Do you
so.
know?
I think it was a couple of years ago. It's just
A little
called
bit older.
Reality.
Hmm.
Yeah, by Greg Kokel. Yeah, it
Interesting.
was particularly of interest to me because it is really unusual to have many of the questions that I had about a certain subject. The answers were there in front of me as he was sharing the book content. I recognized all these things, and it was almost like a complete loop of every question in this particular subject area that I had. He presented it, and as I said, I had heard previous answers to the questions, but somehow they didn't resonate with me. I just couldn't buy into them. They just didn't seem complete enough. But the stuff that he said made sense to me. So it was really a great revelation for me to have some of these questions that I've been thinking about for years having been answered in one place. It was great.
That's so cool. I'm glad you found it and it found
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Me too.
That's amazing.